Hey Zen fam, so recently in the 1000 subscriber celebration live stream, I posited the notion of games and humour and how there's just not enough games that make you laugh. Now, if you want science fiction, boom. If you want westerns, boom. If you want horror, wow, you got plenty. You want cop stories, you want crime stories, you want, anything you want is out there. You can have the lot. There are video games out there that exist where you can be a pigeon dating other pigeons. Everything, and I mean everything, is basically catered for at one level or another within video game narrative structuring. But the one thing that seems to be lacking, as far as your boy here can tell, is comedy. There doesn't seem to be that much in the way of funny video games. Now, funny is hard to do at the best of times. I mean, to write a sitcom or to write a funny movie is hard because everybody's got a different sense of humour. And it's not easy because you've got to make sure that a gag lands and that humour is reliant upon timing. And gaming is often the case where timing is irrelevant. You can't tell it's hard to tell an A to B story in gaming because gamers can move around the map and basically tell their own story, which is one of the strengths of video games, is the ability for, the audience to tell its own stories. So if you have a gaming situation, how do you maintain the story structure where humour can apply? It obviously has to apply at a moment which is built from other moments. So you have to not so much guide the player by the nose, but you have to funnel them down into a situation where it will lead to different situations, and then the funny thing can happen. And you can have series of funny things that happen through dialogue choices, much like a Mass Effect, and there you can structure the humour so that it happens on cue, but on cue for the gamer who's pulling through. Now, I figure for something that's based around a sitcom, what you want to do is have something between the play and narrative structuring styles of a Telltale game, or much like, say, a Quantic Dream game. So with Quantic Dream and Telltale, there are narrative happenings that are flexible to the player's wants and needs, but also critically give out the narrative structure and story beats therein. And this is important because the sitcom, the property that I wish to see turned into a video game, is iconic in Scottish cultural terms. And given that this is a gaming culture channel, I think that I'm best placed to discuss this topic. So, the property that I would like to see turned into a video game is Still Game. Now, some of you out there are going to be going, what's Still Game, dude? Still Game is a classic, modern-ish sitcom based in a fictional Glasgow estate called Craiglang. Now, Craiglang is like a lot of places in Scotland that are basically council estates run by the local authority, where all the buildings and all the facilities have been built and more or less left alone by the local authority for quite literally decades on end. The people that have lived there are descendants of the people that have always lived there, if you get my drift. The families that moved there in the 50s or 60s or 70s, and they've just continued to intermingle with the same people over and over and over. So there are particular cultural idiosyncratic behaviours that are reliant on people being from there and living there and understanding the social rules of that particular environment. I'm beginning to sound like a sociology professor here, but that's just how it goes. And within so-called British society, there are hundreds of thousands of examples of this up and down this wet and windy little island of ours, which is where Craiglang comes in. So Craiglang is in Glasgow. Now, obviously this is West Coast humour, so it's heavily based upon banter, i.e. ripping the mickey at each other. It's heavily based upon sarcasm, because we Scots are probably some of the most sarcastic people on the planet. We dose of swearing, and basically the interpersonal relationships of the characters within the setting of Craiglang, which is key for sitcom writing, is how the individual characters bounce back and forth from each other, and thus giving the writers scope to give character development and tell storylines. So, how do we go from sitcom to game? Well, I'm not a scriptwriter, so I don't know, but I'd like to think that the characters are the main start of it. So let's discuss the characters, shall we? Now, first off, you got the two main guys of the series. You have Jack and Victor. Now, Jack and Victor have grown up in Craiglang since they were wee boys, and now they're basically pensioners. Almost everybody in the cast is a pensioner or nearing pension age, except one, but I'll come to him. So you've got this cast who are all being played by people who are very not of pension age, but they've got the makeup on and the prosthetics and the clothing to make them look like they're pensioners. And pensioners obviously have, different sort of cultural standpoints, and they come with older phrases and stuff where people in Scotland know, but it's only the older generation that tend to use them. Like here in Scotland, if someone is say overweight, what you'll get is, my mum was really big, was a right one for this, where instead of saying, "See her over there, I'm afraid she's rather overweight, isn't she?" What my mum would probably say is "Well, see her over there, she's kind of..." So the word would be said, but the offending word would be said so low that you could only really decipher the word by looking at the person as they were speaking, to further emphasize that they were talking about that person and talking about the thing being judged about the person. It's it's a funny Scottish quirk, especially among people who are in their prime in the sort of 50s and 60s. There's a little bit of that in the 70s as well, so that's a little cultural idiom, if you will. It's some of the things that happen here in Scotland. Maybe they happen where you live too, I don't know. So you've got Jack and Victor. Like I say, they've kept each other forever. They're best mates. They're always round each other's flats, apartments. And they're just the best mates, but they also ken how to take the mickey at each other. They know how to. And there's a lot of words that I would say in Scottish vernacular that matter to my argument, but I can't use because they're technically swear words, because we're some of the most sweary people on the planet. So I'm really having to dance around the language here to keep this PG for the channel, because this channel's family friendly. So Jack and Victor they have a familiarity with each other that comes with such extensive knowledge and friendship over decades that brings. So they're tight, they're grand, they have their humour amongst each other, they have their behaviours with each other, and then those two characters, they go out into the larger environment of Craiglang. And in Craiglang, you've got your principal locations. There's the flats they live in, which is a tower block, a council tower block. Now, I used to live in a council tower block, and it's like a miniature village, but straight up. So everybody kens everybody, or at least if they don't, they know them on sight, and there's a familiarity. And you know what they say, familiarity breeds contempt, and so on and so forth, and judgment, and people in a council estate will always be ready to sort of like go, I know that guy. I don't know him, but I know him. And there's things like that. It goes through all kinds of areas that do similar things. So, Jack and Victor, they go out and they interact with the other people that they've also kent forever. People they've kent forever, like, say, Winston. Winston's just an average bloke doing an average life. He's retired as well. He's not quite as old as Jack and Victor, but he's up there. He's similar in age. And he's wheeling, dealing, just trying to get through life, just trying to get stuff done. In fact, at one point, his character in the show gets cancer, and the cancer ends up in his leg. And he ends up having to actually have his leg amputated. And there's a whole storyline that comes about from the fact that basically he smoked his leg off. He used cigarettes to such a degree that he lost his leg. And there's a whole bunch of story that comes about from the prosthetic he made for himself till he actually got a proper prosthetic from the NHS, which is basically a red wooden stick on a red square platform of like just wood with a sort of red cup thing for the stump to go into. So it's like plant, foot. So it changed the way he walked, and obviously, you know, when you alter a physical characteristic in an extreme manner, you obviously bring humour into that particular scene. Vis-a-vis, look at the Ministry of Silly Walks from Monty Python, or any other character that's had an odd movement, you know, placed into their characteristics on any given comedy product. So Winston was like a hard-working, grafting guy, and he's in the winter of his years, as are most of the cast. Then you also have Tam. Now Tam, he's similar to Winston to aging, and what his major characteristic is, he's tight. Now I don't mean like he's super close-knit with his friends, or that he's like, got really finely toned muscle structure. No, he's a skinflint. If he opens up his wallet, it's an occasion. It's national news if Tam opens his wallet. So he's tight. He doesn't spend money. And that's his major characteristic. He's always trying to skive a free pint or a free meal. Yeah. You'll no see Tam spending money if he doesn't have to. It's that simple. And then you've also got, the other main cast members. As these cast members you'll see, like Tam and Winston and others to be followed, like Jack and Victor, they all go to the Clansman, which is the local pub. Now, most areas in Scotland, like Craiglang, and I suspect in other parts of the UK, slightly run down council estates generally tend to have a focus pub. A concrete monstrosity built in the late 50s to early 70s. Super plain building, probably a little bit of rising damp, made out of concrete, very nondescript, and inside the decor has never changed and will never change. They might change the one-armed bandit, the gambling machine. But the same pints will always be drawn, the same seats will always be sat in, the same conversations will always be had. And it's obviously it's a community focal point, but above a certain age, Probably nobody under, say, 25 or 30 drinks, and the Klansman. And the Klansman is obviously run by the barman. The barman who's called Bobby. Not Bobby, but Bobby. Because in Scotland, that's also a slang term for that. So, this is my Bobby. Oh, I got kicked in the Bobby. So, he's called Bobby, but they all call him Bobby. So, you see, even just his name is him always ripping on the guy. And ever since he came to Craiglang to run the Klansman, he's always gotten a hard time from his patrons. In fact, like whenever Jack and Victor come into the Klansman, Bobby's always going to call them by any given double act that he thinks of. And he does this. Initially, it was an idea that he was welcoming them in with a light-hearted joke. But then it becomes the idea that he's basically trying to rip on Jack and Victor. But it never works, because Jack and Victor have been in the business of ripping on each other and ripping on everybody else for 20 years before Bobby was born. So they've always got the comeback, and usually it comes from Jack. And so he'll be like, this is why the joke doesn't work, and this is why you're a waste of space. Now, 2 pints. Sometimes 2 pints and 2 pies, but mostly it's 2 pints and a particular offensive term that I can't use here on this channel, because, as I've said many times, I don't swear here. So you'll have to see for yourself. And sometimes in the pub is also Isa. Now, Isa is the local gossip, and nothing gets past Isa. She kens everything. She's into everything, and she's from a similar generation to like my mum. So if something offensive needs to be said by somebody, it's either said really loudly, really quietly. And she's not mad educated. There's some things that she doesn't ken, but she kens also everything. And there's many an avenue for that to be exploited. Now, Isa, what she does, she's not quite retired. She works at the local shop. She has a cleaning role and other odd little jobs at the local shop. Now, the local shop is run by Naveed. Naveed, much like Bobby, is a wee bit younger, but not as young as Bobby. And he moved to the area also in around about the 70s, much like Bobby did, and he came to run the local shop. Now, all over Scotland, and I'm pretty sure this is the case all over our wet and windy little island, that most council estates have one shop, sometimes 2, but mostly 1, where they sell a bit of everything. You get your milk, you get your bread, you get your lottery tickets, you get your wee shopping bits done, like rolls and packet of frozen fish, can of beans, cling film, some assorted cleaning products, magazines, just a wee everything store. That's the wee shop up the end of the road, which also used to be known by a particular term that unfortunately these days is seen as a racist epithet, so I can't use it because I'm not racist and I'm not going to use racist terms, but that's just some of the cultural background of Scotland, unfortunately, in that particular case. So the local shop is run by Naveed. Now Naveed is quite a wisecracker. Anytime anything is said, he usually has a one-liner for it, and he is devastating with his one-liners. Now, it's never made clear of which particular cultural background Naveed is from. It's clear that he's from that whole sort of Indian, Pakistan kind of background of the world. Now, it's never made clear whether he's Muslim or Sikh or Hindu or anything like that. It's always that he's from, his lineage is from that area of the world, and that's that. And one of the funniest things with Naveed is he's got a wife called Mina. Now, we never really ever see Mina full on. We'll see her back, sometimes we'll see her side, but we mostly don't ever actually hear Mina. So she's kind of a bit like Wilson in Home Improvement. So we never see her, we only ever hear her, but whenever we hear her, we mostly only ever hear her speaking the language of our ancestors. We almost never hear Mina speaking English. So it's always with subtitles at the bottom and Naveed reacting to what Mina said. And obviously that means that then people are reacting to what Naveed has said about what Mina has said. So there's this triple gag structure that happens, where like Mina will say something, Naveed will say something about what she said, and then Isa will pick up on what Naveed has meant from what Mina has said. So there's this, as you see, there's a structure to the gags, and each one of the characters will rely upon each other for the differing telling of differing jokes through differing storylines. So there's a complexity which is perfect for the dialogue options of something like Mass Effect, something like a Telltale game, or something obviously like, as I said before, a Quantic Dream style game, but within the humour genre. And between the locations of the shop, the park, the local cafe, which is in a fair few episodes but isn't really a big feature, but it's there nonetheless because it's a cultural focal point of Craiglang, the flats of the main cast members, the block itself, the clansmen, you could have a really tight, focused environment where everything is photorealistic. You get the cast in to do the voices and maybe get into the makeup one more time for the capture of the characters. I mean, go real Death Stranding on it, get super nice character models. Because, why not? Because the game is going to be smaller in its physical scale, because there's only a select few locations. Where the game will really shine is its ability to weave a story and weave humour into that story. And I think that's where the game will really come through, because places like Craiglang are virtually timeless. The people and the behaviours and the clothing and the way people speak in areas like Craiglang hasn't really changed much in like the last 30-40 years. I mean, you can tell it's modern, but you can't really say, oh, that episode is so 1990s, that episode is so 2010s. Could be any time in the last 30 years. And that gives it a timeless nature, which is important to comedy. And it's important to gaming, because say you have a science fiction game. Now, what you often tend to have with science fiction properties is a little thing called retrofuturism, where you'll have a property that was made, say, in the 1980s. Like, somebody makes a science fiction film in 1985, and they imagine what this future world of, say, 2014 looks like. So they take their ideas from the perspective of being 1985 person I'm thinking about what it's going to be in 2014. And what you often find when you look at such examples is, for people like us who have lived through, and now it is our past, the year 2014, that often what they predict to be the case generally hasn't happened. And there's technologies and there's social structures and stuff that come about through good science fiction writing. And often these things have never actually come to pass, which is hugely interesting. So if you can have a show that has itself based in the cultural reality in a place that technically doesn't exist, but its characters and its archetypes sort of do, then there's so much scope in that, and there's so many ways you can guide the story and guide the ability for humor. So there's a lot, and I mean a lot, of potential in a game based in a sitcom with such strong cultural identity, such as West Coast humour, based from a well-written, much loved and respected Scottish sitcom from the BBC. So all in all, I think a still game, video game, would be absolutely top notch. But obviously, I need to know what you guys think. Have I missed a trick? Is there something that I've failed to mention in this particular video? Is there something that I've not said that you're going, oh dude, you missed this critical point? Then obviously please say so down below. Typey. Let Zembloke know down below. And what I should really let you know is to hashtag support Scottish YouTubers, and of course, as always, nae bother.